and they know that, if people are mailing to this old address that nobody has checked in years, that means you're probably not doing a good job cleaning up your list. And that's another sign to them that you're not following best practices.
Hey, podcast listener, you're about to discover insider tips, tricks, and secrets to making more sales and converting more prospects into customers with email marketing. For more information about the Email Marketing Podcast or the Autoresponder Guy, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. It's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy, and it's time for episode 93 of the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, where, as I said last week, you're going to discover just how to get more sales, how to get more customers. It's an email marketing podcast, but at the end of the day, this is just marketing. It's just getting sales. And what you learn here, you can apply to anything. You can apply to email marketing. You can apply to your sales page. You can apply to your webinar, on and on and on and on. Right? And as you spend more time with this stuff, as you go through these podcasts, you will discover that a lot of this stuff is carryover. Okay, so you can learn about email. It's going to make you a better sales page writer, for example. And that's what I love about it. Okay, so today I'll be talking to, again, Matt Paulson. Now, Matt came on the show a while back to talk about some rules of entrepreneurship. And today he's back because he emailed me a little while back saying that he's got 120,000 email subscribers. He's sending 4 million emails a month. And during the time, as he's been growing his business, he has discovered a few things about email deliverability. Because when you're sending 4 million emails a month to 120,000 different people, you're going to run into some issues in terms of how to get your email into the inbox, past the promotions tab, how you're going to avoid those bounces, how do you avoid a bad reputation with Google and Yahoo and those kind of things if you get too many spam complaints. So all these different things add up. And like I said, when you're sending that many emails to that many subscribers, just a few small percentage point bumps in your, say, open rates or in your deliverability rates can mean tens of thousands of dollars or if not more to the business. So it's a really valuable topic to learn about. So he's on the show today to talk about that. To get the show notes for this episode of the Email Marketing Podcast, go to themcmethod.com/93. Now, I got a quick McMaster's Insight of the Week this week. It is, what software should you use for your autoresponder? I may have mentioned this before, but I feel it's worth repeating because I get asked this a lot by clients, by people emailing me, and these different things. Everyone worries or wonders, or both, about what software they need. Should they use Aweber or Drip or Entreport or Infusionsoft or something like Salesforce or ExactTarget? Like, at what level, what software should you use? And the answer is going to vary based on the size of the business and the complexity of the operation. However, generally speaking, just pick one. They all do very much the same thing. If you want a fully fledged CRM, go get something like ExactTarget or Salesforce. If you just want like a basic autoresponder, Aweber will do fine. Drip will do fine. If you want some marketing automation stuff, go with something like Drip. You've also got ActiveCampaign. But don't stress over this. Don't think that software is the most important decision here. The main thing, if you want to get email marketing set up in your business, is just to start sending the damn emails. It's not to get the perfect software. They all do very much the same thing in slightly different ways. But at the end of the day, it really is the same thing. Just pick one, go with it, get it running. That's it. Okay. Now, the other thing is reviews. I love reviews. I eat them for breakfast when I can. Seriously, though, when I wake up and I check my computer and I look at the podcast reviews, it really does make my day. It does make this worthwhile. You can probably tell that I do enjoy this. I do have fun recording these podcasts, chasing after guests and having a bit of fun with myself like this, but I also love to get the feedback in the reviews. I sometimes get emails from people saying, "Oh man, I love this," and those are great. I love those emails. But when it comes to the podcast, the best thing you can do if you want to say thank you or show your support, jump over into iTunes or Stitcher. I think is the one if you're using Android. If you have an Android phone, jump over to iTunes, search for the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, and leave me a review. Make it 4 or 5 stars if you can, or not, whatever floats your boat, and tell me what you think about the show. And I'll wake up and I'll eat it for breakfast. I'll just smile. I'll feel all happy and joyful about the day, okay? So yeah, that's it for now. Now, let's get into this interview with Mr. Matt Paulson on how to increase your email deliverability. It's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy. I'm here with Matt Paulson. Now, Matt was on the podcast a while back, episode 69, and we talked about the 7 deadly sins of first-time entrepreneurship, about a book that he was publishing, which went out a little while ago. But Matt actually hit me up recently to say that he's learned all this stuff about deliverability, how to get emails into the inbox, not because he's working at SendGrid or anything like that, but because he's just a guy who's sending a huge amount of emails. So he hit me up and he said, "Here, I got all these notes. How about we get on and we talk about deliverability and how to really overcome some of the common, I guess, limitations when you're trying to send email, trying to get email into someone's inbox." So that's what we're going to talk about today. How to get more open rates. At the end of the day, it means more sales. So that's the simple side of it. So Matt, how are you going today?
I'm doing well. So I publish a daily investment newsletter, and we have, I think, about 117,000 people that get that daily email. So that ends up being between 3 and 4 million emails a month we send out to our subscribers. So we have sent out a lot of email. We've been through a couple of different email service providers. It's kind of along the way in the last 3 years that I've been sending out this newsletter. I've learned just a lot of different things and kind of the best practices, mostly by making a lot of mistakes and having ESPs yell at me. But I think it's starting to get it figured out, and I thought it might be a good idea for us to talk about some of those things because there are a lot of people that send a lot of email, that listen to your podcast, and hopefully they could benefit from some of this stuff as well.
One thing I'm curious about, it's probably the biggest objection that we're going to probably find here with someone listening, is that I'm not technical enough. I'm not saying that for me, but I mean like someone's going to be listening and thinking, man, this is all great and everything, but I'm not a techie guy. So is the stuff you're going to share today, is that something that anyone can implement, or do you need to be like a tech wizard to kind of set this up?
For the most part, you don't need to be a tech wizard. You just need to be able to log in your web hosting account and make changes to your DNS records, which is just clicking around. It's there are a lot of guides to do it, step by step online to do these things. So it's a lot of it's not rocket science. Some of it you might need a developer to change some stuff in your software, but for most of it you can do probably 80% of it yourself without much help from anybody.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's get into it, man. Where's you've brought up these amazing notes here. Where would you like to start? You've got the...
Yep. So I it's broken down into, I think, 6 different things, I guess. So they're kind of best practices, what you should be doing. The first thing is that you should really use an email service provider. So this is somebody like SendGrid, Aweber, MailChimp, Drip, Mandrill. Some of them will just send your email on your behalf. Some of them will kind of manage your mailing list too, like MailChimp and Aweber do. So there's different levels kind of depending on what you need, obviously. And I'm guessing most people that subscribe to this podcast already have one of those. But I think it's, if you're sending mail from your own server, like if you're using Sendy and you set up SMTP, or you're using some WordPress plugin that sends email from your server, that's just a really bad idea. So basically, when you pay somebody to send your email on your behalf and manage your mailing list, they do a lot of nice things for you. I actually use SendGrid. I pay $1,300 a month to send that much, 3-4 million emails, and it's really a situation of you get what you pay for. SendGrid worries about a lot of different stuff for me, which is really nice. They monitor blacklist on a daily basis. They monitor my IP reputation. They just make sure I'm following all the best practices. They make sure I'm on whitelist, and these are all things that we'll talk about, but. When you're paying kind of a high-end ESP, they're kind of worried about the best practices for you. It'll make your life a little bit easier.
Right.
And once you have a big email list, if you can follow best practices and improve your open rates by 5 or 10% just by doing all the right things, that leads to real money. So it's in my opinion, it's definitely worth the investment to pay for a good service.
Right. One thing I just want to touch on, I've got a couple of things here, but the first thing is, what's really the benefit here in the long run? I mean, we talked about more sales, but can you just give a bit more, like what's it done for you by focusing on more of this stuff? How has your business changed thanks to all this stuff?
It certainly has. I think by trying to do all of the right things, certainly my daily newsletters never show up in a spam folder. So, people actually see it, they open it, they engage with the content, they click on ads, they sign up for premium subscriptions. Just at a higher rate. So it's kind of been a multiplying factor. You just get more, you get people to do more of what you want them to do. More people that see your messages is obviously the better, and will lead to more sales and more customers and more of what you're looking for. So it's...
Right. I was going to say, if you think about it, if you think about the list as like a tree or a plant in the garden, focusing on the stuff that we're talking about today, it's a bit like putting fertilizer in the garden. You're going to be able to get more from your crop, more from that plant that you're growing, which is your email list, right?
Yep. And there's a a couple of other things with ESPs. You should really have a good idea of what they're doing for you and what they're not doing for you.
Yep.
Like I think, Aweber, they're not going to set up your SPF records or anything like that for you. You should kind of know what the best practices are and kind of know what they're doing for you and what you're not doing what they're not doing for you. So if there's something they're not doing, then you should do it yourself. And that's you just basically have to ask them and say, do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? Or it'll show on their website. And if they don't, then you know that it's something you need to worry about. And then the other kind of related tip is if you're sending out a lot of email and especially if you're not like doing a double opt-in newsletter that's really boring, if you're doing anything that's aggressive, I'd suggest having a backup email service provider. So we have SendGrid as kind of our primary, but I have Mandrill set up with a dedicated IP address there just in case anything ever happened to my SendGrid account. I used to send email through Amazon SES, and there was an issue where they thought my financial newsletter was some kind of penny stock scam, which obviously it isn't. But when you have maybe a Pakistani customer service person that doesn't understand the financial markets, trying to decide whether or not you're violating their policy or not, you're not always going to get a result that's consistent with what their terms actually say. So in order to just make sure I've got that 100% uptime and deliverability, I have it set up so I can switch over to Mandrill in a second if I need to.
Right. One thing here is that there's a guy that I talk to quite a bit via email, Etienne. I spoke to him recently. We did a podcast here. He also goes by Carl. Anyway, I just mentioned his name because he's probably going to listen to this at some point. And I know that he sends mail via his own. He's very big on his own having his own server, and we've kind of gone back and forth. And he's saying, "Man, you're giving up all these, extra sales or extra open rates or extra whatever by just sending from an email service provider instead of setting it up on your." I mean, he's set up, as far as I know, on like a private server. So his own server with his own software and everything like that. And apparently, gets 100% deliverability. And he's really, really big on that. So, what would you say to someone like him in that position?
You can do that if you're going to be worrying about all of the different things we talk about on this podcast. So if you want to do that, that's fine. But then you have to recognize that, hey, I need to become the expert in deliverability. And if there's a problem, it's my fault and that there's nobody I can ask.
Yeah.
So if, for me, it's a matter of focus. I'd rather be the guy focused on, writing the emails and getting them sent out versus being the guy that's, making sure they actually get there.
Yeah.
I see if I'm on a blacklist, like I got on a Verizon blacklist last week. I just sent an email to my, dedicated support rep. I said, hey, take care of this. An hour later, he said, don't worry about it. You're off the list.
Wow.
So it's nice not to have to worry about that kind of stuff. It's just much fewer headaches, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You certainly do it the other way, but that's not what I've chosen to do. And I think that's made my life easier as a result.
Okay. So it's a case of, you can do it, but yeah, you're really, you're splitting up your energy a lot more. So, if you've got plenty of time, go do it. But in most cases, it's going to be your time's better invested, better spent on the emails and growing the business itself, not just the email list.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So let's move on to, I guess, thing number 2.
Let's do it.
And that is list engagement really matters. So the big 4 ISPs, that's Google, Yahoo, AOL, and Hotmail or Outlook.com. They are paying a lot more attention to whether or not users are engaging to your emails. They only have a limited amount of data available, so they know if people open your emails, they know if they click a link in your emails, they know if they reply to your emails. But those are really the only ways that people, or the email service providers can tell, whether or not that was a message that you actually wanted. So if they see that people are opening your emails, they're clicking through on your emails, they're replying to your emails, then they know that, messages from John's email list are emails that people actually want because they're highly engaged with them.
Yep.
And then if you're just sending, a whole bunch of emails and nobody's opening them, clicking through them, replying to them, then they know that, these are emails that people probably don't want a lot of. And that means, your messages are less likely to get into the inbox.
Yep.
And it's more likely to get stuck in a spam folder. Go ahead.
I was going to say, there's a lot of huge stuff stuff that I do. We did a podcast with the guy from Entreport, the postmaster there, so the deliverability guy over there. And he mentioned a few things. Now, what I've done is I ask people to reply to the first email, and then the second email is the same thing. So first email is like reply and answer these questions. Email number 2 is did you get my email? And by the way, can you just answer another question for me? So get them to reply to the first one. It's amazing how many people actually reply to those emails. And then there's emails throughout the rest of the sequence that do get replies, maybe every few weeks. And there's always a link going somewhere. It's not always to a sales page. It could be to a blog post or an article. And that's just some of the ways that I'm doing it.
Absolutely. So the other kind of good engagement tip is to actively remove bad email addresses from your list. So if somebody clicks the spam complaint button and you get that spam report through your ESP, or if they have a hard bounce and the email service provider says, yeah, this is a bad address, you should really take them off your list right away.
Yep.
If a soft bounce, meaning like their inbox is full or something stupid like that, you can usually wait 2 or 3 bounces before you remove them. So it's I've seen people that like have 30% of their emails are bad and they keep mailing to them even though that like they're never going to get through.
Yep.
And spam or the spam list, ESPs, they look for this kind of thing. There are actually like old email addresses that become what are called honeypots, and they know that if people are mailing to this old address that nobody has checked in years, that means you're probably not doing a good job cleaning up your list, and that's another sign to them that you're not following best practices and maybe people don't want your email. Then another thing is, if somebody doesn't open an email from you for like 12 months, you should probably just take them off your list. If people aren't engaged, for that long and they don't open a single email or they don't click a single link, your emails probably are in a dead inbox or they're getting routed to some folder that nobody ever looks at. And I mean, it costs you money to have people on your list. So if they're not engaged at all, I think it's okay just to take them off the list at that point.
Would you send them an email saying, unsubscribe them, and then send them an email saying, hey, look, you haven't opened an email from us in 12 months. We just unsubscribed you. If you want to resubscribe, click here.
Yep. So what I do is I actually do, I think, 6 months just because based on the amount of mail we send. So at the 6-month point, they get like 3 emails saying, hey, if you don't tell us that you keep wanting this email or these emails by this date, we're going to take you off the list. So they get 3 emails, and the last one says, hey, you're off the list. If you want to reactivate your subscription, just click this link. And some people do, and a lot of people don't. So it's
how many do you get to keep? I'm curious.
What do you mean?
I guess how would you track the success of that?
I guess I don't. I guess I could see what the open rates for that, click-through rates for that email is, but I know it does get some people, and I think sometimes people like they aren't tracked as opens because they might only have like text email and they don't ever click the show images button. So that's kind of a good way to catch those people that might be active even if the software says that they aren't.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So let's move on to thing number 3. That's setting up your DNS verification records. So there are some different technologies or kind of systems that people have set up over the years just to basically say that, hey, this email is actually from this IP address and this domain name. The first one was called SPF, and that stands for Sender Policy Framework. And that basically says, does this domain name have permission, or does this IP address have permission to send from this domain name? So it's basically signs, your email saying, yep, this is from this IP address from mattpaulson.com, and mattpaulson.com says this IP address can send on their behalf. So this is something that I don't think Aweber or even a lot of the services don't do by default if you're sending from your own domain name. And I definitely recommend making sure you have this done regardless of who sends your emails, whether or not it's you or somebody else.
So you really need to set up these, so if I'm sending through, I'm using Drip right now, I'm not sure if they do it, but I have to go into my, hosting account and set up SPF records for my domain, right?
Yep. Because they don't have access to your DNS records, so they can't do it for you. So you should make sure that you have that done. The second technology there is called DKIM. It's basically short for domain keys. And that will do kind of a public, private key encryption that basically proves that every individual message will be signed by your server to verify that it's from your domain name and it's not forged. So it's kind of the next step. And
How
then
do you
the
set
newest
that up?
one, it's basically the same process. So Aweber or MailChimp or whoever, they'll provide you these, the records to put in.
Yeah.
And then you just have to do it, and then they verify it, and then it makes sure, you can test to make sure it's actually working.
Right, and that was DKIM.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the newest one, kind of in that set, is called DMARC, DMARC. And that basically specifies, it kind of builds upon SPF and DKIM. It just says, what should we do with the emails that kind of fail this test? So you can say, if it doesn't match my SPF records, just go ahead and delete the email. Or you can say, if it doesn't match my SPF records, treat it as gray mail. Maybe it's okay, maybe it's spam, or you can just say let it all through, which obviously nobody would recommend. DMARC is probably less necessary than the other two.
Do you use DMARC?
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay.
So I think if you do it wrong, it can really screw things up. And
that's what I was thinking. Yeah, if you forget one of the domains you've used to send email, it's in an email account somewhere. All of a sudden, your emails might just go missing.
Yeah, so I haven't set that up yet. I might at some point in the future, but SPF and DKIM are kind of the 90% of the way there.
And does this make when you set this up, does this generally make I guess a boost or an increase in, I guess, deliverability rates?
I think it does because service providers check for that. They look for signs that your domain name, your IP address is valid. They might look for like an SSL certificate. They might check to make sure there's actually a mail server there. They might check your DNS verification records. A lot of things like that. It's just basically, what are the signs that this is a real website and a real domain that people are actually using, and those are definitely kind of at the top of the list.
Okay.
So then kind of a secondary to that, and this really matters if you're running your own mail server. It's called reverse DNS. So basically with your DNS records, it points your domain name to this IP address, and then the reverse DNS basically says that this IP address belongs to this domain name. And a lot of mail servers will reject email if that's not set up properly. I've seen that in my own bounce records. When I was sending mail on my behalf, I'd see that messages, maybe 3 or 4% of messages would just get rejected because that wasn't set up. So if for whatever reason you're sending out mail on your behalf and you have a dedicated IP address, your web host can set that up for you. I don't think you can do it yourself, but you just ask them and they'll do it for you.
Yeah.
So in the event that you are doing that, that's definitely something to get done.
Okay. We're up to tip number 4.
Yep, and that is to manage your kind of email reputation, your IP reputation, your domain reputation, and kind of keep an eye on blacklist. So, the reputation of your IP address, that used to be the main focus, and now the trend is kind of moving more towards domain reputation because, if you're a spammer and you're on a domain name, you can always switch to a different IP address if you get blacklisted. So now it's, really more on the domain name is kind of where some of the focus is. If you're on a share, a pool of shared IP addresses, like if you're with like Amazon SES or SendGrid or MailChimp or any of those that where you don't have a dedicated IP addresses, they actually take care of it for you because that way, you're sharing an IP address with 5 or 6 other people. So that could be nice and that they'll worry about it all for you, but it could be bad and that somebody else's spamming would negatively affect your IP address, which would be bad news.
Right.
So I think if you have any decent amount of mail, 100,000 emails a month, like anywhere close to that, at that point, I think you should have a dedicated IP address because that way, your authority and reputation is based solely on what you send and it won't be affected by anybody else. So there are a couple of tools that can really help you monitor these things. One is a service called senderscore.org, and that's put on by a company called Return Path, which is big in the deliverability space, but it basically gives your IP address, kind of a score to say this is how legit we think your IP address is. Senderscore.org, and then there's a really cool tool to check blacklist. It's called Multi-RBL, and John can put that link in the show notes. But it'll basically check over 100 different blacklists to see if your domain name or your IP address is on a blacklist, and it basically runs for a couple minutes and says, hey, these are the issues we found, go take care of them. You want to search for both your domain name and your IP address, and if you find yourself on a blacklist, it happens more often than you think. I get blacklisted maybe once a week by some little no-name blacklist that nobody uses, but I take care of it anyway. So I just have my assistant, on a weekly basis check, my IP addresses, my domains against that list, and if there's any issues, she tells me about them, and then I can just go ahead and fill out the form. It's usually takes 2 minutes for each one, but it's really easy to get off them. They're looking more for people that won't even bother to take the time to maintain their reputation as so if you tell them, nope, I'm not a spammer, they'll basically take you off their list.
That's interesting. I just looked up the sender score for the McMethod.com, and it's telling me I'm missing the SPF record. I got everything else, it looks like, but SPF record's missing.
Yeah, so you should do something.
I'll have to get that sorted.
Yep. So I guess we're going to call thing number 5.
Five.
It's called follow best practices, and I guess that's a generic term for everything else that kind of didn't fit into everything. But it's one, just be CAN spam compliant, and that it's really simple to be in compliance with that. Basically, it's put your mailing address on in your email, have an unsubscribe link, use your real name, don't fake stuff, and don't say it's from Matt Paulson when it's really from John McIntyre. You can Google all the requirements, but it's really simple. It's your real name, your address, and an unsubscribe link, basically. And I think you have to identify it as commercial email, so you can just say this is an advertising email somewhere in the footer, and you're fine.
So you've I think you mentioned unsubscribe links. Do you put them at the top and the bottom, or just the bottom?
I actually do both.
Why is that?
I think, if I have it on the top, people are going to make a decision whether or not they're going to click the spam button or the unsubscribe button. So I'd rather have them click the unsubscribe button if it's really easy to get to, because that way they know they're getting off the list and they're not just like complaining about me. Because if they're clicking the spam button, they don't want your emails. So I'd rather have them click my button and then not have a spam report against me.
Right. Okay.
The other thing with unsubscribes is, in Gmail, now at the top, sometimes if the mailing list has it set up right, there'll be like an unsubscribe link in kind of the header next to your name.
Yeah.
So there's this new unsubscribe header that's been out for a while, and that gives you kind of a little bit of a deliverability bump. And just by having that there, when if you click the spam report on Google and that's set up, it'll say, hey, do you want to report spam or do you just want to unsubscribe?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice way to turn what would be spam reports into unsubscribes, which are more preferable.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the other things to follow best practices is just to format your email properly. So you should have an HTML version of your email, a plain text version of your email. If you're going to do an HTML email, you should have the opening, closing HTML tags. They look for properly formatted email.
Yeah.
So if you're using an ESP, you don't have to worry about this so much. But if you're sending your own email, you do have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So that's basically that.
Okay.
And then
pretty simple.
The last and final thing is thing 6, and that is just to kind of review your deliverability on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So if you're with SendGrid or with Mandrill or whoever, you should just log into your account on a weekly basis, every Monday, and just see, how is my deliverability rate the last week? If it's, I usually stick around 99.5%. So I know if it drops below that, there might be an issue. So I just go back and look at the previous week, and, if the rates look good, then I don't do anything. And, if the number went down, then I go and check and see if there was an issue.
Right. One thing I've had, because I'm using, a lot of these, whether it's Aweber or a lot of the other providers, they don't seem to provide, I've never found it, like a deliverability score. It's probably intentional from there. They don't want people looking at that. But I've been using a site called Mail Monitor app that I'm looking at right now. I get good deliverability in like 100%, and most of the time, sometimes it's 96, 98. But Hotmail is terrible. I got one email here right now that's 0% in Hotmail. Sometimes it's 100, but the average must be like 50 or 60%. So
yeah, Hotmail, they give you like a green, yellow, red score. And I'm not quite sure how that works exactly. I think that SendGrid put out a guide about email deliverability. They have some stuff about Hotmail in there. That's worth checking out.
Hotmail looks like they're stricter, or they're evaluating it on a little bit differently to the others.
Yeah, they're all a little bit different. It's just you worry about the kind of the big four, and the littler ones you don't worry about so much. But you do, but you don't.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and the other thing is just to track what your open rates are. If you see a big drop in your opens, that might mean the emails got delivered, but they all showed up in a spam folder. And then, are people actually clicking through the emails? And I like to look back and see, like, what emails did I send that had, like, really high click-through rates, and then what did I do in them to get people to take that action?
Yeah.
So that's a nice way to look at trends.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good piece of advice, where you really should, people should really look at what's been working for them in the past and then try and replicate that. Because some emails, and this is just like a general business thing. Like I've noticed for me, like people respond really well to templates and checklists and any sort of done-for-you sort of thing. So if I have an email about here's some templates, click here to download the templates there, that gets a really high open rate if templates are in the subject line, and a really high click-through rate. But if I mention like a download an ebook or something, it's not going to get anywhere near the same amount of response. So this is kind of like just a long term. You got to notice what people respond to.
Absolutely. So that's basically it for thing 6. So the quick review is of the 6 things is number 1, use an ESP. Number 2 is that list engagement matters. 3 is set up your DNS verification records. 4 is manage your reputation and keep an eye on block list. 5 is just to follow best practices. And 6 is to review your email deliverability on a weekly basis.
Cool. I was going to say, how do you, because I use mailmonitorapp.com. Do you know of any, is there any other service you recommend for checking deliverability?
For me, SendGrid does it all for me, so I've never had to look into that.
Okay.
A very high-end one is called Return Path. They work with people that are even bigger than me, but they charge like $10,000 a year, so I haven't paid for that yet. So they'll, what do they do? They basically get you on some different whitelists so that ISPs, look upon you more favorably.
Yeah.
I think if my list were probably about twice the size it is now, I'd probably think about that, but I don't think it's quite worth me paying $10,000 a year yet to do that.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. And then so you also mentioned that SendGrid has a nice deliverability guide.
Yes, they do. If you go to their website or just Google SendGrid deliverability guide, it's like a like a 30 or 40 page document, and it just kind of goes over a lot of what we've talked about in this podcast, and then just a lot of best practices that you should follow as well.
Okay. Well, I can have a link to that in the show notes at themcmethod.com. If you just go to Google as well, like you said, if you look up SendGrid Deliverability Guide, it's the first one. It's a PDF there. So it looks like there's 2 versions of it as well. Man, this has been epic. I think this has been one of the most, like, as far as detail info-packed podcast, this would probably be right near the top, if not at the very top. Because if someone's listening to this and they get a notepad, I've got this in front of me, so I haven't been writing it down. But if I had a notepad, I'd have a few pages of notes right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of action steps. I think if you're going to do one of these things and just start moving in that direction, I'd make sure you have your SPF and DKIM records set up. That's basic blocking and tackling of email deliverability. So if you don't have those set up, that'd be my first step.
It's on the list, man. I'm probably going to do that. I'll do that later today.
All right.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing this stuff. If someone wants to learn more about you, or maybe get in contact and ask you a question, if that's okay with you, where's the best place for them to go and do that?
I'm on Twitter. My user ID is MatthewDP, D as in dog, P as in pony. My personal blog, I talk about entrepreneurship and business and technology and stuff like that, is mattpaulson.com. Paulson is Paulson. And then my email address is just matt@mattpaulson.com. Feel free to email me, and I usually get back to people pretty quickly.
All right, I'll have links, like I said, at the show notes at themcmethod.com. Matt, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to discover more insider tips, tricks, and secrets about driving sales with email marketing, sign up for daily email tips from the autoresponder guy. Go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Sign up, confirm your email address, and I'll send you daily emails on how to improve your email marketing and make more sales via email. You'll find out why open rates don't matter, and the 7-letter word that underlies all effective marketing, and much more.